Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cherie, and thank you for joining me at the Festival of Innovation of the Gulf Insider. I do fintech my day-to-day work, but I also am the editor at the Birthday Collective. And today I'm really so happy to be asked to moderate a fairly interesting panel on digital education and upskilling in partnership with Intel. Really in this post-pandemic, we say post-pandemic, but this pandemic actually really end. But in the peak of the pandemic work landscape, new skills, knowledge, new jobs are constantly emerging, and everybody, employers, employees, are always looking for new resources, skills, in any kind of support and scaffold to help us kind of level up alongside this pace of digital acceleration, which I think the entire festival has really talked about. And today's panel, we've gathered three really, really cool people to discuss how we are able to do so. How do we put together the relevant resources for citizens to adapt to what we consider, I guess, the new normal in this digital age? First up, I have with me PeiChin. She's a policy lead at the Digital Government Unit at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Hi, PeiChin.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Are you based in Singapore? Saying hi. Are you based out of here, or where are you at?
Yes, I am in Singapore. I returned a few weeks ago. It's a new office.
See, nice. We also have with us from Intel Corporation, the staff solution architect, Kenny. Kenny, wave, say hi.
Hi.
And you're also in Singapore, right?
Yes, I'm based out from Singapore.
Cannot tell these days, last time Gulf Insider, we used to have everyone in the same room, but nowadays it's kind of cool. Our third guest, Yasas Thalagala, who's in the strategic engagement exploration lead at Citra Social Innovation Lab in Sri Lanka. So Yasas, you are in Sri Lanka joining us, right?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone.
How's things been over there? I've never been to Sri Lanka.
It's been good. We're going through another wave of COVID cases these days, but I think it's peaking and numbers are reducing. Really hoping that things will settle sooner.
I was just telling Yasas before we started that I think Sri Lanka is one of my bucket travel lists. I don't know about PeiChin and Kenny, they must get to travel quite a fair bit, but I think hopefully one day we get to visit you in Sri Lanka when everything is better.
Please do. Yes, look forward to it.
Okay, I'm going to just jump right in. I think the idea of digital education upskilling has really been something I think the entire industry, entire world has been talking about, because COVID has really brought about this massive increase in acceleration in digitalization and technical take-up. Maybe from each of your vantage points, can you just share what that experience has been like in the space of digital education and the work that you do? I always say ladies first. So PeiChin, you want to start us off?
Sure, happy to go ahead. So just a really quick introduction about what we do at the Institute. So we are an independent not-for-profit organization, and we develop policy solutions for global leaders to help make tech policies work for everyone. So we're kind of coming at it from a very sort of policy perspective, and what we would recommend and advocate for is to look at things from a more sort of systemic point of view. Similarly, when we look at education, we like to perceive it as a part of public service instead of specific tech tools. So that's been our focal point so far. And obviously throughout the pandemic, there's been so many changes, unprecedented changes when it comes to education, home learning, as well as remote learning for adult learners. And I think that probably one of the most resounding trend is how do we start to see these things as part of a continuum instead of being sort of a segment or rather a fragment on its own. Because I think in education, or rather in higher education in particular, there has always been the sort of argument in sense of, who are we producing our graduates for? It is not just for the labor force. But I think more and more we need to kind of to reflect and to rethink about how we perceive education and skills.
All right, cool. Jump over to Kenny now. Kenny, how is it from the Intel kind of point of view?
Yeah, so let me just give an intro about what I do first. So I reach out to governments, enterprises, so it could be a web e-commerce company, a gaming company, it could be a financial institution, it could be a telecoms provider, right? And then we highlight some of the Intel portfolio of solutions. Intel works with partners to sell hardware solutions. And there's a fair amount of Intel hardware that goes into information technology nowadays. And when you look into information technology a couple of years back, it is at the back end. But now what you are seeing is that it is transforming. It is the analytics is being used by businesses to drive their business. So it's in every business. It is in the ability to execute and to outcompete your other companies. So Intel is to help companies get into all these areas, and we provide some of the building blocks of the solutions.
Cool. And to our friend in Sri Lanka, how is it for you guys?
Yes, I'll just give a quick intro to Citra first for colleagues here who are not aware. We are Sri Lanka's first social innovation lab. We were set up in 2018 as a joint initiative between the government and UNDP here in Sri Lanka. And over the last 3.5 years or so, we've been working closely with government and other development partners on really bringing in human-centered design approaches, design thinking, systemic design, foresighting into developing solutions. Over the last 1.5 years or so with the COVID pandemic, it's been difficult. We've been adjusting. As I mentioned earlier as well, with strict lockdown measures, we were able to somewhat control the spread in the country last year. However, given the implications that had on the economy, we had to open up. And since late April this year, with the Delta variant coming in as well, the cases have been quite high. And from our point of view, really converting some of our delivery of our projects into virtual platforms. And the biggest challenge, I would say, has been working with the government sector who were not really ready for that transition. That's been an interesting journey, but we've been working closely with our partners in really adapting to this change.
I think clearly when it comes to the pandemic, I think everyone assumed that our technology trajectory was not bad. I mean, that's from my perspective. I thought we were doing okay. And then COVID happened and suddenly it's like, oh my God, we're really not, we need to level up significantly more. What has been the biggest challenges for all of you guys in terms of leveling people up to just keep up with the kind of acceleration that has been happening alongside the way we live today? Anyone wants to go first?
I'm happy to jump in. So we're currently doing an education research piece around an inclusive technology in education. And actually what we have seen is what we call the sort of trilemma between cost, scale, as well as quality. And we have to acknowledge that pre-pandemic, this trilemma already existed. But of course, as a result of COVID, which we're still sort of struggling with, this problem has exacerbated. So one of the things then we looked at was how can a technology become a solution instead of being a divider in this scenario, and how can we sort of build on the momentum of lifelong learning and remote learning and so on. And we're currently sort of developing what we call a minimum viable school product, which we hope to advise governments on, because I think that one of the sort of aftermath of COVID that we're seeing, especially with people with children who are forced to homeschool all of a sudden, is that there is a very, very big difference between digitization of school materials or learning materials versus the digitalization of the whole teaching system and the whole sort of way of learning. So I think that that gap definitely needs to be bridged if we are to look at how to harness technology and to optimize investment in technology.
Intel, Kenny, did you guys have
anything? So I think if you look into it, Intel is in the business of hardware, and we are creating the solutions out from the hardware. And there's a bunch of partners that we work with in order to get the solutions into the marketplace, so it's easily scalable. So as the post-pandemic, right, I think to paint out the situation, there's actually a supply chain shortage of silicons, right? Every government is going down the path of home-based learning, so they are buying laptops, all type of makes and models. There's an e-commerce boom. So there is servers that are being procured and put in place. There's if you are into the home gaming, yeah, you are stuck down in your home, and the gaming business is moving quite rapidly as well. So there's a lot of systems on the IT side that needs to be enabled for this. So Intel, I think we are looking in order to help out in every one of these areas when each of these technology requirements come in. We will work with our customers in order to put in place the solutions for it. So in a lot of ways, right, it's doing the enablement. So if over a Zoom call, like what we are doing today, you multiply that multifold, right? So the video conferencing capabilities needs to be in place, and it's every company, every government, every educator needs that. So this are areas that I think as a technology company, we feel that it's in our area in order to help this pandemic using digital tools and solutions.
Cool. And how is it over for you guys in Citra?
Yes, our work over the last couple of years in really addressing this has been two-pronged. One, looking at really influencing policy changes, and the second being looking at that upskilling and reskilling component on digital tools. Early last year in March, right after the onset of the pandemic and the restrictions, the whole education sector in the country came to a standstill. So the government appointed a presidential task force on Sri Lanka's education affairs, who reached out to us and wanted our support in the work that they set out to do, which was to conduct an extensive review of the existing system and to sort of understanding its shortcomings when dealing with a pandemic situation. We were able to use our approaches, the design thinking tools, and really support them with the thinking and coming up with the recommendations, which a few of the related ones were really looking at digital needs assessment, understanding the country's situation when it comes to access to devices, infrastructure, the connectivity within schools, and understanding the country's economic situation as well, really looking at how do we set up public-private partnerships, accessing the support from IFIs, and that on that front. Another area, really looking at an integrated learning management system for the country, because there is a big gap, or rather a disconnect between the general education and higher and tertiary education. So when we're designing solutions that go beyond this pandemic, how do we bridge this gap and develop a more holistic solution? But a very strong focus on teacher development, education on digital tools, because that's a big gap that we understood during our work over the last couple of years as well. The next being on upskilling, we've been working, focusing on the tertiary and vocational education sector, really looking at providing courses, content that are delivered online, supporting institutes within the government like the Vocational Training Authority to develop course material which are targeted at upskilling the digital knowledge, the tools that's required within this scenario. I'll get into a bit more detail on those programs as we go on.
Cool. I mean, the three things that I think have come out from all three of you is really the idea of scale, right? Scalability, scale, the kind of, you know, how big must this go, how magnified this must be, or how multiplied this must be. So scale and scalability is just a big thing that you guys have each brought up. The other one obviously is change, right? Just that the rate of change is quick, and it's a lot more robust and more rapid than we expected. And the third, I think, that has come up, which is of real interest to me, is the idea of a divide and a gap. right there. So I'm going to ask you guys a question, and we're going to play a small game with my panelists. I usually make them do, if you guys can put your hands together like this for me in your screen. So this is going to be your answer scale, okay? So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to move your hand, like this being like very, very close, and this being like super, like there's a big gap, right? So I'm going to ask you from your vantage point, if I look, and the question is, how big are the gaps from your vantage point between the have and the have nots where technology is concerned? Ready? 1, 2, 3, you go, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Oh, well, PeiChin's off the screen. Okay, second question. So have and have nots. Okay, then I'm going to ask the second question about is really about the young. What is the digital gap that you foresee that's happening between where they need to be and where the young people are? And I say young, really anyone who's kind of young and really a digital native today. Okay, so ready, 1, 2, go. Okay, so much nearer. I can see PeiChin's hands at least in one screen now. Okay, and then the third one for the elderly, right? I mean, this is something that's come up even in the other panels, you know, for the mature older ones, people are, you know, there is concern. How big are the gaps from your vantage point for the people who are, I guess, in the older set? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, not so bad. Oh, it's not pretty big. Okay, we're going to start with the widest gap. So Kenny gets to go first. Kenny, in terms of where the elderly and more mature people are concerned, we'll get to all three divides in a bit. But can you just kind of share your thoughts on what we can do? Why is the divide so big? How can we kind of bridge that? And